I appreciate everybody being on here, especially taking time out of your busy day to look at First Impression Ministry. And so I hope you understand that whether you're a greeter, whether you help people find a seat, whether you pass out a bulletin or carry a smile that makes everyone feel at home at your church, you are part of something incredible, and it's very, very important to the whole aspect of your church. Um,
Oh my
and
goodness.
so, what I want you to do right now is think about the last time that you went either to a restaurant, but preferably to a fast food restaurant, and don't answer what it was. And I want you to think about that experience. And then I want you to think about the last time that you went to Chick-fil-A. And I guarantee you, those two experiences were totally different. But all of us, regardless of whether it's a church, whether it's a restaurant, whether it's a hotel, we all go in and we are looking for things and we come out with an impression that may be good or it may be bad. And you've all heard the statement, you only get one chance to make a first impression. And so one of the things that we know is that first impressions are lasting impressions. So go back to that idea, that restaurant. If you had a bad experience at a fast food restaurant, no matter where that restaurant was. It could be in your hometown, and if it's a main fast food place, if you had a bad experience there, you will not go to another one, no matter where that's at. And the same is true about the church. If our guests have a bad experience at our church, not only will they not go to our church, but they will probably not go to a church in general. So first impressions shape how people experience our church. And the thing that's important about a first impression ministry is it's not just how they view our church, but it could be also how they view Christ. And so hospitality that I believe in a church is not just about a handshake. It's not about giving free coffee or free donut or directions to the nursery. It's about creating an atmosphere where people feel seen, where they feel valued, and where they feel cared for. The problem, however, is, and Dr. Rayner in one of his books, we're going to talk about it a little bit later, basically says most churches think that they're friendly. And then Gary McIntosh in his book, Beyond the First Visit, says this, and this is so important. It doesn't matter if you think that you have a friendly church or not. If visitors don't feel like you have a friendly church, then you're not a friendly church. I've been telling our church for years that we're a good first, second time visit, but we're not very good at doing third and fourth visits for visitors because we tend to think, oh, well, they're here, and we still don't go out of our way to be overly friendly. So we're going to be talking about how hospitality is truly a very important ministry, and it's a way to extend God's welcome to everyone who walks through. And so by the time we're done, I hope that you'll see that your role as whatever you may be, whether you're the pastor, whether you're a greeter, whether you're trying to start a first impression ministry, is about helping people remove barriers so that they'll be more apt to hear the gospel. And I'll say this real quick. You can have the most powerful service, you can have the most powerful message, the most powerful music, but if something happens from the parking lot to the pew, then they will not be back. And I don't mean that in a negative way. It's just they have already perceived or viewed and made a decision about your church way before you ever get in that pulpit and preach the first time. And so during our church was trying to find a first impressions or fix our first impressions ministry at our church. We did a lot of things. We did panel discussions, we did workshops. But in one of our panel discussions, one of our panelists made this statement, and I think it's very important. She said, first impressions for a church can make or break relationships. They may affect the guest's overall view of not just the church, but Christianity as a whole. In our society, I think you know this, people are coming to church not only with baggage, but they already have preconceived ideas about the church. They already have barriers up, not just about church, but about Christ in general. And we are Christ to people. We may be the only Jesus that people see, the only Bible that they read. And so we have to understand that there is value, eternity value involved in every guest that comes. And so Tom Rainer, once again in his book, said some guests are not Christians. They are struggling with matters of faith, and their visit is a clear indicator of the work of the Holy Spirit in their lives, and they are seeking answers, and your church is a place that they have come to get answers. So the way a church welcomes guests can significantly impact their experience and their perception, not just of your church, but their perception of Jesus. Is he a Jesus that welcomes people? Is he a Jesus that loves people? Is he a Jesus that values people? And so these are very important. Another book that I highly recommend, and I can answer these questions at the end about books, is Secrets of a Secret Shopper, Reaching and Keeping Guest. Greg Atkins put, the practice of true hospitality can be eternity altering, and we'll be seeing this later in our presentation. So your first impression ministry can help someone draw closer to God, and here's the scary thing, or it can push them further away from coming to a church. So how you do things does matter. And so what is the heart of a first impression ministry? And I hope you realize, like she said, this is part one of three parts. So we'll be getting into specific roles and things later. But why do we do a first impression ministry? What is the point? And so to me, why we do it is because the biblical aspect of hospitality. And I'm going to give you a couple definitions of hospitality. First, hospitality is the quality or disposition of receiving and treating guests and strangers in a warm and friendly and generous way. Hospitality actually comes from a Latin word which means both host and also guest, but also means welcoming and lodging guests. And if we're honest, the way that we view hospitality has changed over the years. You think about homes. Homes used to be built with a big front porch for the purpose of showing hospitality and have people over. Now they have a small front porch and a big back porch, and it's almost as if we say we want to be private when the idea of biblical hospitality is going out of our way and welcoming people. Another definition, I like this one. It says, away from home, surrounded by strangers, yet you feel welcome. And so that word hospitality has great history with it. It's where we get the word hospital, hospice, hotel, and many other words. But what does the Bible say about hospitality? What is the biblical standard of hospitality? And I hope you understand it's rooted in the New Testament. It's rooted in Scripture. In fact, in the New Testament, the word hospitality means love of strangers or showing brotherly love to strangers. And God has always been concerned with how we treat strangers, not just in the New Testament. In the Old Testament, in Leviticus, God said this, when a stranger sojourns with you in your land, you shall not do him wrong. You shall treat the stranger who sojourns with you as the native among you. You shall love him as yourself. And don't miss this. God reminds them, because you know what it's like to be a stranger. He said, you were strangers in the land of Egypt, and I am the Lord your God. So God told the Israelites to treat strangers with compassion because they knew what it was like. Jesus also said in Matthew, he said, then the king will say to those on his right, come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry and you fed me. I was thirsty, you gave me drink. And then don't miss this, I was a stranger and you welcomed me. So when you go above and beyond in your church, and treat people, especially the least of these or guests, as valued guests, you're actually welcome them as Jesus Christ. I think it's also interesting for those that may be pastors on here. One of the key aspects or qualifications for a pastor is that they are to have the spirit of hospitality. We see that in Titus chapter 1, but also in 1 Timothy 3. He says, an overseer must be above reproach, the husband of one wife, sober-minded, self-controlled, respectable. But he also says hospitable. So we should always remember that people matter to God, and if they matter to God, they ought to matter to us. And so a church needs a first impression ministry to connect people to Christ and to his bride. In their book, Comeback Effect, Jason Young and Jonathan Malm gives a more recent, better definition about what hospitality is in the church. It's about caring for the emotions of the guest just as much as it is about serving them. And so tonight, what I want to focus on in the next few minutes is this idea that what we do is important, but the heart behind what we do is more important. I'm going to say it again. What we do is important, but the heart behind what we do is more important. If all you're doing for a first impression is to get numbers, you're doing it wrong. But if you're doing a first impression ministry for the purpose of reaching the lost, presenting the gospel, loving them, caring for them, showing them value, then you are doing it right. And so we have to have a heart for that type of ministry. So we're going to look at four types of hearts that I believe that we need to have, and then we'll have some questions here at the end. The first one is a servant's heart. A servant's heart. Um, all of these basically are just going to be definitions of Christ. And what would Jesus do is if he was in charge of your first impression ministry? What would Jesus do if he was your greeter? What would Jesus do if he was your parking lot attendant? What would Jesus do if he was in your nursery or your safety team? What would Jesus do? And we know the Bible says that even Jesus came, the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve. And so, in a first impression ministry is not another program. It's not something you add. And I'm just going to say this: whether you have a first impression ministry or not, you have a first impression ministry. And what I mean by that is whether you're going out of your way, having a greeter, a host, doing everything you can to be friendly, whether you labeled it or not, you do have a first impression ministry because people are leaving your church with a first impression of your church. So the idea is not about another program. If you're going to write something down, write this. It's about being on mission. It's about on mission for Christ, serving others the way that Jesus would. So a servant's heart sees ministry not as a job, but as an opportunity to reflect Christ. Go back to what I talked about earlier. Whatever fast food place you thought of, and then you compare that to Chick-fil-A, you go to a fast food place, there's people there that are just doing a job. They're just trying to get a paycheck. Yet Chick-fil-A teaches their employees that they are there to serve people. They're there to serve the customer. And so when I think of a first impression ministry and doing my work on this verse, Philippians chapter 2, kept on coming up over and over again, which we know it's talking about, let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus. And it talks about this in verse 3 and 4. Let nothing that we do be done through strife or vainglory, but in lowliness of mind, let each of us esteem others better than ourselves. Look not every man on his own things, but also on the things of others. So when you're serving in a first impression ministry, it's not about you, it's about Christ, and it's about others. And it's literally about meeting practical needs for the people before they even show up or even need them. And here's the idea. If they come to your front door, it's about holding the door open. It's about guiding guests, not pointing guests. I don't think you should point guests to where the restrooms are, where the nursery is, or your children's ministry. I think you should take them there. It's about answering questions. And so a good way to do that is to think through things before your guests ever arrive, such as, does your church have signs about where the restrooms are? And I'm just telling you, the two most important things are they want to know where the restroom is and they want to know where the nursery is. So do you have signs for those things? Do you have greeters? Do you have hosts? And a greeter and a host is a little bit different than just somebody passing out a bulletin. We think about those things, and you also, as a servant thinks about what the master wants, but a servant also thinks about what those they serve need. And so be thinking about things such as the feelings that they're going through. And so we need to think through those emotions of anxiety, stress, and unknown. This means prioritizing the feelings of guests over the task that we perform. So here's an application point that you can use before Sunday. And so Sunday morning, you show up. Here's what you need to be asking yourself. How can I lighten someone's load today? Because the first impression ministry is not just about guests. It's about everyone who attends your church. And one of the ways that our church has done this beautifully over the last few months as we've revamped and restructured ours is we've been thinking about things before people even step foot on our campus. So one of the things I'm just going to highlight that we do is we have a parking lot team. And what that basically means is we have guys out in our parking lot are ready to assist people and to serve them with a smile. We have many people that come that are either in a wheelchair or they may need just extra assistance. And so we have people there smiling, ready for them to help them lighten their load. Another opportunity, when it rains, these same men and some women will have umbrellas to take people to their cars to the church or from the church to their cars. And it's just another way of showing them that they matter, that they're seen, and that they care, and that we're glad that they come. And so I tell our volunteers all the time, this is a theme for our first impression ministry, is see a need, fill a need. If you see somebody that needs something, whatever that may be, your job as a servant is to do everything you can to fill that need. And so to start the heart of a first impressions ministry is you have to have a heart uh, to serve. The second is a loving heart, a loving heart. Jesus said that the way the world is going to know that we're his disciples is not by what we wear, but by our love, by the love that we have for one another. In fact, he said, by this you'll know if you're my disciples, if you have love one for another. I think it's interesting when we think about love and we think about hospitality, the writer of Hebrews tied the two in Hebrews chapter 13. He said, let brotherly love continue. And then look what he says. Do not neglect to show hospitality to who? Strangers. And here's the warning. You never know. There may be an angel that comes to your church disguised as a guest. And how do you treat them? So, and I hope we understand dealing with people can be messy. I do believe nowadays more than ever, people are coming with more baggage. People are coming with some messed up views. People are overwhelmed. They don't know that you're supposed to sit a certain way, act a certain way, talk a certain way. So it can be messy. And if all we think of is the mess, such as they're going to mess up our carpet, and we don't think of the mission, we've missed out. And that mission is always to love people the way that Jesus loved us. Because First John says this, the way that I love people shows my love for God. So behind every handshake, behind every smile, behind every conversation, the fuel needs to be the love of God. Because people may forget what you say, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. People may forget what you say, but they'll never forget how you feel. And here's something that God gave me, and so I'm just going to pass it on to you. Nothing tells a stranger I love you more than being attentive. Being attentive. How many times do you know somebody walks into your church, there's a greeter, and that greeter is having a conversation with somebody that they know in the church, and all they do is they stop long enough to give a bulletin and then go back to that regular attender or member, and what that tells that guest is you do not matter. So there's no better way to say I love you to a stranger than being attentive to them. And so here's some keys. One is listen intentionally. So if you're going to listen intentionally, that means you also have to ask good questions. You don't necessarily have to ask, "Is this your first time?" Okay, they know that, but ask some questions where you get to know their family, you get to know who they are, you get to find out how did they hear about your church, do they know anybody, and as you're asking these questions, don't be asking so that you can get to the next question, but listen intentionally, which also leads to this. This is key. Remember their names. Remember their names. Here's a good key. If they have a family and you take that family to the nursery, it's a good time to know their names. But then after church, your job is to go find that individual, remember their name, ask them, say, hey, John, I'm so glad that you're here. Hey, how did your kids like children's church? How did you do this? How did you like the service? But remember their names because that tells them that you were attentive to them. Also, show that they have value. If that scenario, when somebody walks in and you're talking to somebody, I tell our greeters, and we're still trying to work on this. We don't do a good job of it. That if you're in the middle of a conversation and a guest walks in, that conversation is over because that person is more important than that conversation you're having because that person is somebody that the Holy Spirit and God has sought to come to your way, and there is something bigger than them just visiting your church. So go out of way. You can always come back to that conversation, but show that they have value. And showing they have value means that you take them to the nursery. You take them and show them where the restroom is. You take them to their seat. You sit with them if possible. You go above and beyond to do what they need to do because Christ went above and beyond for us. And I love this. If you're going to take pictures of anything, quotes, here's a good quote to take a picture of. When the right touch, a caring word, and a genuine exchange occur, people experience the love of Jesus. That is so key. When the right touch, a caring word, and a genuine exchange occur, people experience the love of Jesus. So we have a servant's heart. We have to have a loving heart. And this is kind of a da-da moment here. You got to have a welcoming heart. They got to know that you want them there. In fact, Tom Rainer wrote a little book called "We Want You Here," and that should be something that everybody reads as well. We want you here. Paul said this in Romans. Therefore, welcome one another. How? As Christ has welcomed you. So go above and beyond to welcome people. And true hospitality makes strangers feel like family and outsiders feel like insiders. There are people that come to your church, and if we're not careful, we tend to think that we're a friendly church. We'll talk about that in a minute, but really we're only friendly with those people we know. And so these new people, they don't know the inside jokes. They don't know these things, and they literally feel like an outsider. And true hospitality makes them feel like family and makes the outsider feel like an insider. I'm going to go back to what God said in Exodus. He tells the children of Israel, do not oppress a stranger. And look what he said. You know what it's like to be a stranger. I'm paraphrasing there. You know what it's like. And the problem with our churches is we have forgotten what it's like to be a visitor. I suggest if you are trying to start a first impressions ministry, or maybe you have one, or maybe you've had one for a while, or even you're for a pastor, I highly recommend, and this is going to sound weird, that you go to another church that you've never gone to before as a guest. Don't go to a church where you know anybody. Go to a church where you don't know anybody for the first time and get that experience of what it's like to be in a church. Another suggestion, and we've done it at our church, is have somebody that doesn't know very many people. They know you as a pastor to come to your church to be a consultant, and they're going to walk in as a guest for the first time to remind you of what it's like to be a guest. Um, Tom Rainer, great book, Becoming Welcoming Guest, says churches perceive they are friendly because the members are friendly to one another, but they don't think about walking in the shoes of first time guests. Okay. This is not, I'm not talking about a seeker sensitive movement. What I'm talking about is, yes, I mean, if you come to my church, I'm going to preach the gospel. You're going to come to my church, we're going to sing hymns, we're going to sing other songs, but we're going to preach the gospel. We're not going to sugarcoat anything. Okay? I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about do not have any barriers leading up to that message that would prevent them from saying this church loves visitors, loves guests, loves people. So you have to be thinking about what it's like to be a first time guest. Mark Waltz, who I think used to be the guru of first impressions, um, said this. I don't think I have it on the screen, but it's easy to forget what it's like to be a guest in a new and unfamiliar setting. So one of the ways that you do this is right here on the screen now. Anticipate needs. Okay. So you walk into your church for the first time. So if Sunday's coming, whether we're ready or not, Sunday's coming. So tomorrow at church, Wednesday, walk into your church, try to have new eyes. But before you even walk in the church, look at everything. Look at your parking. Look at your landscape. Look at do you have access for people that are handicapped? So anticipate needs. Do you have signage? Do people know where to park? Do they know where the restrooms are? Do they know where the nursery is? Do they know where children's check in? Do they know all these things? And all you're doing is trying to anticipate needs, because if you anticipate it, you can be prepared before it ever happens. Also, create comfort. I'm not talking about create comfort where you just water down the message. I'm talking about create comfort where because a lot of people have anxiety. Is there a way that you can ease that anxiety? But also help guests feel that they belong. They want Cheers. Some of y'all probably remember that TV show. Not suggesting you watch it, but it did have a song that I think is so good. Everybody wants to go where everybody knows their name. So get to the point of making guests feel like they belong. And so here's a good thing. I'm gonna put it on screen. It's called the 10-foot rule. So start the 10-foot rule. Here's the 10-foot rule. Greet anyone who comes within 10 feet of you with eye contact, a smile, and a warm word. And here it is. Those that are not even on your first impression team. So every member of your church should learn the 10-foot rule, because first impressions is not just about a greeter, a host, parking lot attendant, safety. It is about everybody in your church being on mission to connect people to Christ and to the church that God has placed you in. So everybody needs to learn that 10-foot rule. I'm going to say it again with eye contact. Once again, remember I said the way that you show a stranger that you love them is be attentive. There's nothing worse than talking to somebody, and as you're talking to them, they look somewhere else. So have that eye contact. Also, um, make sure that you have a smile. Um, I tell some people if you're not in a good mood, please don't be a greeter that day. Like that's just it's just kind of there it is. So eye contact, a smile, and just a warm word of such as we are so glad that you came today. And so here's the goal. I'm going to just give you something that just happened within the last 2 weeks at our church. We had 2 weeks ago we did church at the park, which it's hard to do church at the park and have a good first impressions, but we went above and beyond to try to do that. A family came, and then they came to church the next Sunday. At church the next Sunday, like I always do, I ask people at the end of the service, we have what we call connect cards on our bulletins, but we also use them as prayer requests. And I just say, if you're here visiting, we'd love to get record of information. They filled out the information, and I contacted the individual. And here's a response that I got about our church. I'm not going to tell you the name of who it was, but here's what he wrote. He said, personally, I've been out of church since high school. I've never really felt a strong connection at church, but this past Sunday was different. It was eye-opening to walk in and be greeted by people. I didn't even know I've never experienced, be greeted by people I didn't know. I've never experienced that before. He went on to say that our church was one of the friendliest churches he's ever visited. And the good thing is, here's where you got to understand that it is all leading people to Christ. Tomorrow night, I'm going to be sitting in my office with this man and his wife and discussing baptism. And all it happened is because somebody went out of their way to invite them. And then our church went above and beyond to show them that we care and that we love them. So think about it. A smile, a handshake, a welcome from someone he didn't know completely changed how he viewed the church. And for the first time in years, he felt noticed and connected. That's the power of hospitality. And the last one, and we won't spend a lot of time on this, um, but if you've ever been around me, you're going to realize that I am all about doing everything to the best of my ability for the glory of God. In fact, my life verse is Colossians 3:23 through 24. And whatever you do, do it heartily or passionate as to the Lord and not for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance of your reward, for you are serving the Lord. What we have to start doing at our churches is doing a better job with everything. Everything needs to be done as best as we can. Now, I'm going to say this. There are going to be churches that are bigger than your church. There are going to be churches that have more finances than your church. But I coach basketball, and I tell my boys that I coach, you're always going to find somebody bigger and better than you, but you should never find somebody that works harder than you. And the idea when it comes to doing church ministry is we cannot have the attitude it's just church, it doesn't matter. We ought to be the experts at doing things with excellence because we realize that what we're doing is an act of worship to Almighty God. So excellence honors God and it communicates value to people. When you do things at your church with excellence, it tells those guests, hey, we are prepared for you. Gary McIntosh stated, serving people inside and outside your church means that you offer excellence in all areas of ministry. One of the most common issues that I hear in churches, and it's even been at our church sometimes, is when we make the statement, this is how it's always been done, or this is how we have always done it. Leaders have to remember that how we do things, I said this earlier, how we do things speaks volumes compared to what we do. How we do things, the heart behind them. So excellent doesn't mean perfection. It means being intentional, prepared, and consistent. And when our teams serve with excellence, when our greeter is trying to be the best greeter that they can be, when our parking lot attendant is trying to be the best parking lot attendant they can be, when they're going above and beyond and doing it not for the approval of Shiloh Hackett, not the approval of somebody else, but they're doing it for the glory of God, you will do it in a different manner. And so when we do things with excellence, we're telling people, you matter here because you matter to God, you matter to us. So do everything. And so here's what I mean. We're going to talk about just real quick. I'm going to get in this the last two sessions later on. One of the ways that you have a heart of excellence is clean spaces. Your first impression ministry means that you clean your church. You need to have a think about it. If you ever went to a restaurant and you didn't feel like it was clean or you didn't feel like the bathroom was clean, you're not coming back. If you've ever sent your children to a nursery and the nursery was dirty or grungy, you're not sending your kids back. So when we talk about this, you go above and beyond in excellence so that when they step foot on campus, and here's the saying, by about 5 to 10 minutes, the moment they step foot on campus, they've already made a decision whether or not they've coming back, whether you before you've ever preached. 5 to 10 minutes. That's the window you have. So make sure that you have clean spaces. Make sure that you have clear signage. Okay, clear signage. I can't. I'll talk about this later. When they walk into your church, and if you don't have signs, I'm just. This is going to sound weird. Welcome them. You're so glad you're here, and say, oh, and by the way, in case you're curious, are bathrooms, and you tell them where the bathroom's in, and you can show them if you don't have signage. You take them to the nursery, have clear signage. You also need to have organized teams. There's nothing worse than people doing greeting, hosting. They don't know where they're at. They don't know what's going on. They're not organized. Okay. Also have clear communication. And this is where training comes in, and we'll talk about this a little bit better. When people walk into your church, I read this today, and this is good. When people walk into your church, they should say, "Oh," instead of "ouch." They should say, "Oh," instead of "ouch." Let me give you just a little bit of personal testimony. There's too many churches, and ours has done it, where they walk in and there is junk everywhere. There's clutter everywhere. And we know it, we see it, but we've seen it so long that we've ignored it. And I tell people when you do that, that is not a sign of excellence. When people are coming to your house, if you knew somebody was coming to your house tomorrow, you would spend, especially your wife, all night cleaning up and preparing. The idea is guests are coming Sunday. Are you doing everything with excellence to be prepared for them? So here's the application for this, and then we'll close. Serve as if every guest is a VIP, because in God's eyes they are. So Sunday's coming. Start praying now and preparing now for Sunday. I am a firm believer that God will send guests to your church. But when's the last time that you prayed for the guests that God was going to send? When's the last time that you prayed for the opportunity to serve them this Sunday? And also, when's the last time that you thought on a Friday night and Saturday night, are we prepared for the guests that are coming on Sunday?